found AHO Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotek and Bill Protzmann. And a very good day to everyone, wherever you are in the world right now. It's December 1st. Happy to be here on AHO Radio with The Conversation. Authentic Human Outliers Radio is here to offer our audience comfort and support for being the genuine, thoughtful, amazing people that you are. To be a safe place to trade ideas without too much judgment and to model what a conversation, real dialogue, can accomplish. I'm Bill Protzmann, moderator and co-host for today's conversation. Our objective today is to expand the idea of how AHO Radio began when John Krotek and I launched it early in 2020. Authentic discussion of topics that matter most. The conversation is just that, a series of essential topical discussions. Today's show is one of them. The conversation isn't so much about answers as it is about the process of loving the questions themselves. Then, as the poet-philosopher Rilke once wrote, you will gradually, without noticing it, live your way into the answer. Before we unveil today's topic, I'd like to introduce the team. First of all, let's see here. Come on, let's see. Where are the squares, everybody? Host, do your job. Here we go. There they are. Today, our co-host John is not with us. John Krotek is recovering from COVID. He sends well wishes. He's in like the dry cough final 2 week later on kind of stage and looking forward to being back on the air with us soon. John, we love you, buddy. Thank you for all you do, including founding Green Zone Hero and the amazing hashtag Planet. It's Giving Tuesday, so if you want to wear your support, visit hashtag planet.co and you'll notice some amazing ways you can do that. Bringing their courage, wisdom, and healing expertise to the conversation, we're honored and humbled today to welcome back Steven Morrison, founder of the Spiritual Workout, and, oh my gosh, Julia Stubbe. I'm so surprised. It's like I'm looking at my screen and all of a sudden it's like you're there and you're present. Julia Stubbe, Intuitive Spiritual Counselor. Welcome, you guys. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Have you ever had that experience where you look at the screen, there's just like energy coming off of it? Right?
Really?
Yeah.
Was it magical?
It's magic. I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. I just looked over and it's like, oh, and it hit me. So pause and all of that. Oh, it's so good. Glad you guys are here. So unlike many discussions these days, the AHO Radio unwritten agenda is to be thoughtful, succinct, and honest. And since none of us really know the final answer to the most essential questions we're going to ask, it's helpful to agree to cooperate or disagree with honor in service to the process, living our way into the answers. It's going to take us a few shows, and this is the third one, to fully explore things. So John and I want to thank you, Steven and Julia, for your generosity, your vulnerability, your bravery to be here and participate. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
What a great opportunity to be able to sit here and chat about stuff, right?
You always get me with that succinct part, but I'll do my best.
Oh, no, you know what? It's an old word. I have a story about that. I won't tell it right now, but I love that word.
It's a great word. It just doesn't usually apply to me.
The word that I love that you use all the time is grok. I say that to people and say, can you grok this? And they look at me funny, like, what age are you from? Are you like the 60s, the 70s? When did we get that word, right? So, hey, audience.
Old is new again.
Can you grok this show? So the question we're here to explore today. So following up on the last two conversations we've had about wounded healers and being the authentic healer and what it's like for a client to find you for the first time and what they can expect. Today, we're going to explore vulnerability. And so the question that I want to ask is, knowing that outliers like us find that these topics come so close to our heart, let's look at what role vulnerability plays in the work that you guys do, both internally for yourself and externally for the clients that come to you. So it's like, what does vulnerability look like in real life for Julia and Steven? How do you wear that in your role? And then how that vulnerability is sort of mirrored, or perhaps will eventually be mirrored by people who come to you for the amazing services that you provide. Is that a quick way of getting into it? How does vulnerability work? What is it? How do you wear it?
Julia?
Ah, punt. Punt.
Okay, so for me, my growing up and my story, coming from that background of the very unfunctional, painful, violent childhood that I had, and showing that vulnerability and allowing that to shine through, what that does, it makes, or it assists, I shouldn't say it makes, it assists a client to really be able to relate to me, to see that, oh my gosh, it's like she really gets it. She really understands because she's lived it, but it also gives them hope, because it's like, oh, I never would have even thought that was part of her story, because it's no longer my story, but it's still a chapter. And it's part of what has created the being of who I am by me going through all that and living through that. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I want to get back on that one because, Steven, I'll ask this to you too in just a second, but was there a moment where you realized that you'd sort of transitioned from the past into the moment where you acknowledged and accepted that past? And then
well, for me, I've always accepted who I was. And it's like, I still remember a friend of mine, because with my mother being a psychotic alcoholic and growing up in a single household and all kinds of other stuff. She said to me this one time, and this was in my early 20s, she goes, you always took responsibility for your own choices, and your own actions. You never blamed your mom for any of your choices or anybody else. You always owned it. So I've always owned myself. I've always allowed that vulnerability. And that's just who I am. It's like my heart's open, and sure, if I get hurt, I get hurt, but it's all part of the experience. And sometimes it's like, sometimes I'll say, it's like, I'm just going to close up. I'm not going to be vulnerable. And it's like 12 hours later, it's just who I am. It's like almost, it's just like in my DNA. I don't know how to shift that, or how not to allow myself to be authentic that way at this point in my life, especially.
I love that perspective. It's so unlike mine, right? I had to own it. But I'm glad we went here. I'm going to track on your answer, and I want to bring Steven on board to get us up to like where we are sort of in the same story. So vulnerability for you, Steven, how does that look and feel?
Well, as soon as you asked it in the context of my work, I kind of saw it as first me, then my clients, the people that come to me, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, I have to already have been willing to be vulnerable enough throughout my own journey to develop the tools and skills that I have that I can then use in my work with other people. And part and parcel, my work is a version of therapy, right? Something's going on. Somebody has to come in and they have to talk about what it is. So I have to have gone through enough, as Julia was saying, so that it's clear and obvious that I'm a safe place, as it were, for people to be vulnerable themselves. So I have to first be vulnerable, go through all my stuff to be able to then turn around and encourage others to be vulnerable. So I first saw that as a two-stepper, but then there's another piece within the work that I'm doing as and when it's going, that there are moments when it feels right and appropriate for me to share a story of my own experience with people that I'm working with, right? And so that's where it's not just, okay, I've done all my vulnerability and I'm done. And, so that it does continue on. But I think that I couldn't, as Julia's saying, I think too, couldn't even have a practice if I wasn't already willing and able to be vulnerable along the way. And somehow, that word was never discussed in any overt way when I was growing up. But I remember being very young, like even junior high schoolish age, and, crushes and, dating and this and that. And I just remember kind of you're gonna laugh, grokking this idea
There we go.
that you can't, hey, we're only 10 minutes in, right? I got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
I got to come up with a word so I can play the game with you guys. I don't have to think of my word.
Tickle Bill's fancy. That, you know, that if that moving through life with an open heart requires a willingness to be vulnerable. And later on, I learned, well, what does vulnerable mean? You know, if I'm afraid to be vulnerable, then that's just some belief I have about myself. And I think I just didn't have, I've just always been willing. And I think of it in those terms of romantic love. It's like you can't really explore a romantic relationship without risking getting trashed, right? You
Right.
just can't. So like Julia was saying, I think for me, it's part of my DNA, even if I never knew that it was. And, you know, I'm here to help people dispel the whole idea that there's anything wrong, bad, or dangerous about being vulnerable. I mean,
I will admit that for many people, it's a learned skill. And that oftentimes the clinical experience of vulnerability is very difficult because, at least in my experience and maybe in yours too, you're sitting across from someone who is being professionally, clinically detached, right? They're offering you care and compassion, and it's like, that seems like it's real, but you know their training is to not engage fully, I guess is a better word. I'm not saying this for any critical purpose. I'm just saying, you know, you go to somebody for help. Like I went to the doctor yesterday for my physical, and he's a great guy, whatever, but he's got a threshold.
right.
And if you cross the threshold, everything, it comes off the rails, right? And he'll very quickly bring it back to something that's in the lane and that keeps him from having to be a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to be more of one, I guess.
But he would
thing.
say it's how I maintain my professionalism.
Well, true, right?
Right.
Because doesn't that practice of professional detachment, doesn't that sort of keep you, clinical detachment, doesn't that keep you from experiencing anything you want? I don't know what the technical term for this is, but there's a psychological term where you begin to experience the authentic feelings of the other person. And I want to use the word projection, but I don't know if that's the right thing.
There's empathy, there's transference. That's a whole other.
Yeah, that's transference is probably the
thing.
one. But where, you know, there's that line. And so in your work, you guys, does that line still exist? Is it
Well,
necessary?
for me being, you know, a high level empath, it's like there is no line,
Yes.
because I feel it's like being that connection is, I feel, and like everything that they're feeling, I feel the emotions. It's like, I have a friend who is going through some stuff, and she went to that dark place this past week, and I hadn't even talked to her, but I just knew, and I just was like in tears and sobbing because I was feeling her grief and her despair, you know. And it was like all of this, and it was like I was like right there with her. I'm like, and then I finally got to speak to her the next day, but they had a new plan, so it's like there was hope there. But she said, "You're just mirroring me." It was like because I sensed that. So the line for me is like I have to really be aware energetically, you know, of creating my shields as far as that goes, and you know, being grounded. But when I'm in a session with a client, it's like I'm opening up completely to source so I can get all that information. And there are times when I've done a session and I've worked with them and I have tears coming down my face because I am feeling the emotion that they are feeling. So for me personally, there's not a line, you know, as far as that goes. But when you were talking about, you know, the physician dynamics, it's like there's also that dynamic sometimes where they do say something that it's almost comes out that they have that personal connection, and it almost comes out as a judgment. And it's like, and then it's like, then you have to, then it's like, then you withdraw from that. So it's like, if they're not being genuine as far as that goes, and that the training and it's just the way I'm perceiving it, and it might not be for everybody, but because they're all by the steps and the rules,
Right.
that what comes out can seem very critical actually to someone else.
I completely relate to that because my colleagues in the music therapy profession have a very narrow pathway around what they can do and how they do that. And that's something that they've evolved over 50, 60 years worth of research and best practices. And I know that world pretty well. And I also know the tension that exists when you're working with music between somebody who is in a therapeutic relationship role and someone who is purely musical. And I imagine that many of my colleagues are always in that place of wanting to go to the next connecting spot, that music affords to us, but knowing that within their clinical practice, there's a specific set of things that they can do and lines that they can't cross. And I have nothing but respect for that, because that's a huge part of being a therapist. So, but I always find the pull there is interesting because, like you were saying, Julia, how can you be an empath and not be completely open? There's no way to have a line if you're going to be an empath.
And you don't have a choice if you're an empath.
Like, better, well said. Yeah, there's really no choice.
There's no choice. It's like that's just part of who you are, and you learn how to create those shields at the times when you are with a lot of people, and you're getting bombarded with all those emotions and all those feelings, and even physical. It's like for me, it's like I even feel physical pain or physical blockages.
It comes in.
It's like option. Oh, you don't, once you pick that option, you don't have any other options. It's like, it's all part of you.
I want to pull the thread on shielding because I think that's a big part of this that we'll get to in a second.
Okay.
But first of all, let me go back to Steven. In your practice, Steven, and working with clients, do you feel that there's a line there or a necessary place where you need to stop going with someone, or are you willing to go like as far as it takes into vulnerability?
I'm always willing to go as far as it takes. And in listening to what we've been saying so far, I feel like I'm not on the Julia side of things where there's no choice and I'm already in it and there is no line. But I'm also not a big fan of that classic detached therapist.
Right. Tell me about your mother. Right.
Yeah. And I think for me, and I'm just talking for myself, what makes a difference is, all the work is so centered on the client and that person. And so it's really about being in the moment and what do they need? Oh, they need a story from my life right now, and that's just because it's organic and called for in the moment versus I have some agenda, like I will tell one story per month of my own, it's nothing like that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just always really what's going to work best with this person at this time in this moment, because whatever it is today, it might have been different last week. Right. So, the ongoing thread of vulnerability in this kind of work is also when in the role of the practitioner, one offers up thoughts, ideas, suggestions, opinions, that's a big vulnerability right there, right?
You're opening yourself, right?
Yeah, because what if I get it wrong? What if I miss, where I'm going with this? What if it doesn't get received the way it's intended? So on that level, there's a lot of ongoing vulnerability, risking, taking, I think.
Do you find yourself
embedded,
like leading people that way, like offering risk in anticipation of it being accepted and connecting at that level?
Do I ask again?
I'm not sure the question was as specific as I wanted. So by offering a risk and opening yourself up on a personal story, do you find that creates an invitation for the clients to also do the same?
Absolutely. Especially when they're new and the relationship is newer, right? Then you do reach a point, I think there was a whole style of psychotherapy that was it Carl Rogers? Just sitting in the room and...
Yeah, just sitting there.
basically sitting there, okay, keep talking, right? And
Which
so,
is much better than that beat you over the head gestalt trying to break something loose.
right, that's another way to go. So yeah, I'm trying to think but I also, yes, it definitely engenders. So some of it is just modeling, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
especially when I'm doing online. So I've got one person that I'm talking to and two faces on the screen, but a whole bunch of other people listening, right? And
Yeah.
so it's also just a way of non-verbally modeling. This is an okay place. This is a place where we can talk about these things, and just encouraging people. I don't get hyper crazy about, oh, come on, be vulnerable, be vulnerable.
It's a
Hopefully
buzzword.
those words never come out, right?
Yeah.
But nobody can come in and do the work that I am offering without a willingness to be vulnerable. They can't. And that is another thing. Sometimes I don't have to do anything because all the
Just there.
participants are doing it with and for and to each other,
Yeah.
and so then it's a done deal. So it really is a difference, I think, between somebody coming in the beginning, what goes on here? Am I safe? Natural stuff. Then they find out, for the most part, that it's okay, and off we go. But the work can't be done without that willingness. It just can't.
Oh, that's better. Excuse me. Is there like a vulnerability scale that people could sort of ask themselves where they fit? Someone who's completely locked up and doesn't want any risk at all is probably less vulnerable than someone who is wide open and able to talk about their woundedness. Is there some sort of continuum in that process that people can, anticipate going in?
I never really think of it in those terms, because even that person that you just described, who's more, if they've shown up on my radar, they've already done some level of, all right, I'll take a chance here.
Julia, it's probably different for you, but do you feel
Well, like a story comes to mind, a little story. I started offering these free mini sessions where you get recorded on YouTube and out on Facebook. And I had a woman sign up for it. And then like a week later, she said, well, I got to cancel because it's like, I really don't want to be seen, da, 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 da. And I said, well, that's all part of the promotion. So I said, okay. And then she wrote back, she goes, was there any way I could be like, you could like put a blur in front of my face or this or that? And it's like, so she clearly was being called to have a little session with me.
Yeah.
But I clearly could see she was very uncomfortable with this. So for me, it's like, I said, you know what? It's like, we'll just do something off the side here with that, so that you don't have to be recorded, and give you that opportunity to still do that. And because I did that, she was so grateful and she opened up, because I could see her struggling with it. So you've got to really honor everybody's place of where they are on their, being vulnerable or being out there. For me, it's like, first there was the radio show. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be out there. And it's like, we do readings, we read people's energies. And it's like, I have my co-host Carol E. Schloth, who's my co-host, and we see energies the same. So it really validates what we're seeing. But when I'm like doing things on my own, it's like, well, I just got to go with it and I got to trust it. But who knows what this means, and who knows how it's going to be received. But most of, 99% of the time it's received very well. And then other times they're trying to analyze it and make it into something else. And it's like, but that's their choice. So, so it's to me, it's identifying and honoring and not pushing somebody to a level, a vulnerability level that they're not really comfortable with. But it's also, for me, it's about encourage them to let go of their current story so they can embrace a new one. So we've got to find that balance there as far as that goes.
Yeah, the thin line.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, I saw you nodding over there, and I mean, this is part of the art of what you guys do, is knowing exactly how to guide someone along that thin line. And I'm going to ask a sort of a very personal question, but in that process, in that moment, Julia, Stephen, in that moment, what does it feel like to be you?
Well, for me, because my belief is I've been working on myself and clearing myself. So I have a really clear connection with source and the information and energy that comes through. So I am not doing anything. I am just a vessel for this information. And as long as I stay in my heart and I'm not in my head thinking, how's this going to be received or that, whatever comes out is going to come out. And I have to trust that it's exactly what it's supposed to be. And I had to really stay out of my monkey mind, which I'm really good at this point in my life. However, sometimes the client gets in their monkey mind. So then I've got to come and like, okay, so let's look at the concept as opposed to all these little and move from there. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's like you're working to stay out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
In a sense, which must be, well, now that you have practice, it probably doesn't feel the same as it did when you were first starting it, but I can feel that flow, like performing on the stage. There's sort of a flow that goes with that, where I disappear and everything else just sort of happens. Even though I'm, physically present in every other way, but I'm not it. The it is some bigger thing that's happening in the world. Okay, Steven, you're nodding. So how does it feel in that moment for you?
You just described it. It's exactly the same thing. And I would argue that it's, whenever any of us are aligned, on point, doing our heart's desire, then that's what happens. So when you first ask the question, what's it like to be you? It's like, I think I sort of disappear. Not really, because I'm very much there, and everything about what's going on is purposeful and by my invitation to people, right? So, but then when I'm in it and it's happening and I'm doing it and, they need to be vulnerable and I'm being somewhat vulnerable and it's all in the flow, then it's over and I'm like, well, that's perfect. That's lovely, wonderful. Thank you. More, please,
Yeah, because it becomes a beautiful dance. It's just like, it's a dance of the energies, a dance of the conversation.
Right.
And if you just surrender to it, it just flows. If you have an agenda, like, and I'm not, and there are people out there that have, you've got to do all these steps and it's got to be this way. I think that really restricts the possibilities, because when we're being in the moment and being in our heart space, we're surrendering to what the universe or source has to offer to empower the other person to really empower themselves.
That's a beautiful setup for the safety of that place. Because I know when I'm on stage, it's very safe. It doesn't matter what happens up there, but I feel a sense of familiarity and comfort almost, and contentment in being in that place. And also the ability of taking risks becomes much more possible on stage for me than when I'm in real life. So when you're going to take a risk like that, obviously, you might screw up the music. Okay, so what? You did that. But on the other hand, something beautiful might happen. And at that moment of risk for you guys, you're so wide open. How do you then also protect from any sort of backwash that comes in? This goes to the shielding question. So, Steven, let's start with you.
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this subject.
Yeah, I thought you did. This is a really important thing for clients to understand.
So the shielding thing, in my world, it's not uncommon for somebody to ask about or talk about some practice that they have for that exact thing, protecting, shielding themselves from nefarious energy in the world, right?
Right.
And so they have various practices for doing so that fortify them and make them feel good when they engage the world. I have zero judgment about any of that, but I also personally have never aligned with that whole thing, because underneath all of it is a belief on some level that I'm not safe, or I'm not okay out there, or I'm not going to be okay. And it, to me, just me, that feels very defensive. I don't want to wake up and start my day in a defensive posture, feeling that I'm unsafe, and unless I do this thing, it's all going to go to hell. along the lines of what we were saying about a willingness to just move through the world with an open heart and see what happens, right? So my thing is, at the end of the day, have I collected anything along the way with my open heart and my way of being in the world that's just not mine? Has some energy attached itself to me unwittingly? Have I empathically, unwittingly collected anything? If so, that's when I do my process. And I just say, of releasing any and all energy that I might have picked up along the way that isn't mine, that isn't serving me, that just, that I just collected. Just like I used to live in New York City, and you go out in the city during the day for a day and you come home and you're sort of dirty, right? We used to call it city hair. Yeah. It's like, I mean, okay, so what do? You take a shower. You don't get up in the morning and say, oh my God, I can't go out in the city if I don't, because some stuff's, although some people do, right? So again, I'm not here to judge anybody if that's their preference. My personal preference is live life, be open, go out and know and trust that you're always fine. And there are always things you can do to right yourself if you wind up feeling off kilter in any way, just like getting sick or something. That's sort of how I look at all that.
Julia, now we're in the shielding world.
Right. Well, there's, and if your reality, you're true. It's like your thoughts and your beliefs create that reality. So I agree with you in that, Stephen, as far as that goes. For me personally, I didn't know anything about grounding, clearing, and shielding till I was probably in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I physically, being an empath, was getting bombarded. And physically, my health took a case. And once I learned how to do that, and the clearing part is very important as well, but the shielding part, it really assisted me as far as that goes. So, but it's based on the person's belief and their reality. So in that, I 100% agree with you. But as far as my experience goes, where does that come from? It's like, because, I've cleared beliefs, I work with those beliefs, and then I go into a place and I lose all my energy and weight and I end up passing out. So yeah. If I didn't shield myself, because I did that, I allowed myself to be out in the world. And for me, in this reality that we're in now, that is something that's necessary for me.
Right. I'm not that sensitive.
Yeah. So
I'm really not.
Right. So it's just, I think it's just different for everybody on that level as far as that goes and how that works. But clearing is important for everybody. Yeah. Because it's like, and like I use this beautiful, I just imagine it in my mind. It literally takes less than 30 seconds. It's like blue diamond waterfall just coming down and all the little diamonds like clearing everything out and the water just washing away, allowing me to be me, clearing all outside entities, influences, and programs. And it's like, and if there's anything else, I just take my spiritual shop back and suck the suckers off, and it's just the visualization of creating that in your mind creates that reality for that to happen. So I honor where you are and how you do it. And I think that's great. Part of me is like a little envious because. Well,
I'm not a high level empath. I'm an empathic person, but I'm not at that level. And that's why I say, I'm not here to tell anybody what they should do. But I will say most of the people I come in are not, Julia, where you are. And most of the people that I'm dealing with are just afraid. They've just got a set of beliefs that have them sort of locked up. So in the work I do, I just go right for those beliefs and let's change those. Let's identify those that are not serving you, or anything that's in the fear realm is just, kind of useless.
Absolutely.
And, you have every right to have them. They're just not helping you. And unless you change at that level, the life's not going to change very much. So, so that's usually what I go in, and it's usually people that are not having the same kind of issue that you're having. It's just, they're just fearful.
Right.
And so,
and with, I lost it. I have to bring my thought back.
They'll come back.
Keep going.
Okay.
It's totally gone.
No, I love this point in the work because for me, just the practice of shielding is often a place where work can happen, because I wind up sort of clarifying what it is that I'm scared of. And at that moment of clarity, the fear disappears. And so even in that place of being spun, there's an opportunity, there's invitation that I feel that comes in that way. And grounding, clearing, and shielding, 3 different practices. But I love that you gave us the clearing one. It's Julia, anybody that can do that kind of a simple visualization can clear.
Yeah, and the belief that, talking about beliefs, a lot of people have the belief that it has to be complicated and difficult to work.
24 steps to clearing your chakras. Blah,
It's
blah,
like,
blah.
literally, the process that I use is like 30 seconds to a minute, because once you identify what it is, it's like we're rocking and rolling. It's like, I'm grounding, I'm connected, I'm clearing, and I got my rainbow egg on. I'm ready to go. And literally it's that simple, because once you tell your body, your energetic body, what you want, and it identifies when you're saying, we got the rainbow egg, it knows exactly what you're asking for. It's like, so it doesn't have to be complicated to work, but there's a lot of belief out there. Oh, I've got to like sit here for like 10 minutes and do this. And oh my gosh, if I don't do it right, it's not working. And it's like, you can't do it wrong if it's your intention and your belief. It's like, it's like, and that's the fear. It's like, I get clients who are like, well, am I doing it right? I'm like, yeah. It's like, what makes you think you're doing it wrong? You're creating that reality. If you want to believe in it, maybe you just need to amp up your belief system that you have, that you're a powerful being and you are able to create that energy, because everything is energy.
And also to feel it. So if you do some sort of process, whatever it is, just feel it. That's the answer right there. You'll feel the difference.
Yeah, it doesn't take a precise ritual that we've been doing for 2,000 years to make the process happen. The process is this.
Absolutely. And if you, when we talk about facilitators or practitioners, if they tell you it has to be their way or the highway, you're not in the right place. You're just not in the right place, because to me, it's like whatever works for that person works for that person. And if it's working for them, I'm not going to, it's like, because I'll ask them, is that working for you? Are you feeling it? It's like, okay, well, maybe if you visualize it this way, but if it's working for them, why mess with it? And it's like, because they'll ask me if they're doing this right. I said, well, do you feel better when you do it? And they go, yeah. I'm like, well, then it's perfect.
Then it works. Let's take the shadow side of that, though, because there is this thing that I've noticed in the world where people are very attached to their beliefs, and they work pretty well. My mom, bless her heart, decided that she would let herself pass on rather than give up her spiritual beliefs. And all you can do is honor that. So the question here is, someone comes in with that kind of a belief system and wants to make progress. And I'm not going to ask a how question here, because what I want to know is, as healers, as practitioners, I almost said it. What do you do to invite a person who is very in their belief system to open up the crack just a little bit to see if there's something else available?
I just go right into asking them what they want. What do you want?
Mm-hmm. What do you want to create?
We know what you have. We know how you feel. What do you want? And usually it's, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward question. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Want to feel better? Do you want to live a life? Do you want to die? What do you want? And it can be a jarring question, believe it or not, for a lot of people. Not everyone, but a lot of people. But that, for me, in the situation you described, Bill, is where I would start, and probably always get a response. Probably always get a response. Everybody knows what they want. Sometimes it's right on the surface. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, but usually not more than that. And then that's where we go. And then we eventually get to a place, well, if this is what you want, your foot is on the gas, essentially. If that's great. But then your other foot's on the brake with this belief that you have. So something's going to have to give here.
Have you ever had a walk away in that moment?
Sure.
I mean, that too, I think, can be progress of a kind. Because
Yeah,
I've been in the chair and said, no, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
And, my belief is there are no accidents, and maybe that's all that person needed. I mean, most people, by the time they get to me, will stick with it. But for sure, some people are just earlier on in the process. For some people, it's not as normal. Just talk about everything and process everything as it comes up. And it's very, very new. And you hit spiritual workout, the work I do, and it's like, oh, I got to play here. I'll come back another day. But most people, so yeah, do they bounce? Sure, of course. And with my blessing, go find what you need elsewhere in the world. If I'm not the guy, I'm not the guy. That's fine with me. But really helping people to connect with what they want. And what I find is that we are so conditioned in our culture anyway, to all these thoughts and ideas about what's possible, that we've abdicated the whole notion of answering the question, what we want, in favor of what we think is possible, in favor of what other people have told us we should have, in favor of what other people have said is possible or not possible. And I understand all that. I come from that world too.
Yeah.
So,
Julia, for you, what is it like when the wall of belief is up, but the person behind it is saying, and I want your help?
Well, for me, they're probably coming to me for a completely different reason, because they know I'm intuitive and I see. So they want to see what's blocking them. They want to see what's keeping them from what they want. And, like you said, Stephen, about the possibilities, I encourage everybody to be in the question and not give the answer, because if you're in the question of what else is possible, I always look at it like, if you're in conclusion, you have one possibility and it looks this small and it's this door at the end of the hall. And when you go, well, what else is possible? How does it get better than this? How does it get easier? All those, first of all, the doors appear and then they all open and there's all these possibilities. So I'm a firm believer of being in the question as opposed to being in the answer. That part of it. And when we go, it's like they always have a choice, because when I'm working in their Akashic records and the energy of it, are you ready to let this go? I'm always asking them. So they are a participant. Or if I see a block in their energetic field, are you ready to let this go? That's entirely up to them. So it's like if they are, and it's like I still see something that might be holding it energetically, it's like, okay, well, let's bring in education or bring, this information in for you, and it's from their higher self. And it's like, then I can see it just going. So their higher self is working with their lower self, their lower consciousness is working with their higher consciousness. So they are an active participant in it. And if they've come to me, if they've gotten to me, to the point of the out of the box person, because everything I do is out of the box, even for your standard healing energy practitioner, because I look at things completely different. I've had clients, most of my clients say, I've never had an experience like this. So it's like if they've ended up on my doorstep, it's like, I know that they're ready, or they really want, because they're really looking for something and they've been really guided to me. So I haven't, and I can tell on the other end, if like somebody says, well, it's like they like that session, but where they're part of it is like, they have that doubt if it was really real, because it's not tangible. So it's like, that's their belief system. And if they're ready to clear and work on that some more, then they'll show up again. And if they're not, then maybe they'll find somebody else who can work with them at a level that they're ready for.
Is doubt a part of being vulnerable?
Is doubt a part of being vulnerable? Huh?
I picked that because you gave me the word, but I imagine there are other parts of vulnerability that aren't total fear, but doubt seems to be a place where many of us are these days. What's real? What's the facts?
you mean doubt in terms of, am I good enough? Am I that kind of thing?
I'm leaving that one open because it could be on the client's side too.
Well, that is the client's
That's who I was thinking of.
Am I being gentle here? I mean, there
You're
there
being
are
very
days,
gentle.
where the Batman tights just don't quite fit, right?
Oh, I see what you mean.
But it also comes as a client, like coming to you. I'm like, well, like Julie, you were saying, does this really work? I mean, and you have those sort of, maybe curiosity is a better way of putting it, self-doubt.
Well, my
If
spiritual confidence in this point is like I have a strong spiritual confidence. So, because a lot of times I have no idea where my ripples go.
Mhm.
I just trust that whoever's been I've interacted with has gotten what they need, and be it. If I get a beautiful testimonial or I get this that, I'm grateful for that because it helps to um, really solidify that spiritual confidence. And it's not about ego, it's that spiritual confidence, like, okay, yeah, spirit is really working through me, source is working through me, I am a clear channel and I am assisting, and I am grateful.
And I mean, if it's going to be on the practitioner, and I don't know what this is going to sound like, but I don't doubt at all. I feel like that's my one thing that I have in this world that I have cultivated is my ability to do my version of this practice, which I made up anyway, and I didn't really make it up, but I kind of did, right? So and the confidence comes from, 30 years of my own cultivation of it within myself, such that no, I don't doubt it at all. I don't I I don't know what it will be for other people. I can generally talk about it, but fundamentally each person that comes in gets what they get and does what they do with it.
Yeah.
But I don't ever doubt my ability to do the one thing that I'm telling people that I can do.
Right.
I would
I
doubt
agree
my
with that,
ability on
yeah.
virtually anything else. So when I'm doing a session or I'm doing any kind of facilitation online or otherwise, one person or a whole bunch of people, it probably build not dissimilarly to when you sit down at a piano. Well, I won't speak for you, but it's like, okay, all the work's already been done. Now it's time to just do it. That's when I light up, when that light goes on, I'm just like, all right, what are we doing here? Because that is the one place for me personally where I have zero doubt
I feel it like
about where I
curiosity,
am and
though.
what I'm doing.
I mean, I know what I'm there to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I always wonder how it's going to turn out, which is
Yes.
it's different than doubt. Like, I'm going to be able to do that. Whatever it happens, I'll be good, right?
Right.
But the outcome is just always
Not
up
my
in the air.
job.
It's like,
Right.
yeah.
I can only measure by myself. So when it's all done, how do I feel? And if I'm really on my game, and usually I am in that mode, then it's just thank you
Yep.
for that opportunity to be me and do my thing and be of service in the world in a way that motivates and excites me and seems to have some positive benefit for other people. That's all I've asked for. That's all I want. This is amazing. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you more, please, and this and better, right? So
This exploration is really interesting for me because when you're called, anybody who's called, I've listened to lots of people talk about this, whatever their profession is, and they feel and say the same kinds of things that you guys are saying right now, which is, when I'm in my space, when I'm doing what I came to do, it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I just know that the universe or source or spirit is utilizing me to at the highest potential, and I trust that. Like when I was first starting, playing with the energy and stuff like that, I had a 3 rule. It's like I had to hear something 3 times before I would share it with the client, and like now it's like it just flows out of my mouth or whatever, and it's like. And I'm always, I sometimes I'm just always amazed that I get to really channel that information and it comes out and it really relates to the individual the way it does, because I don't really think of myself like that. So sometimes where I get the disappointment with a client, I've had it like one time, it's like they're looking for a reading. They want me to tell them their future.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's
Different purpose.
It's different purpose because I have nothing to do with your future. You have everything to do with your future. So when they're looking for somebody to tell them how to be or what they have to do to get there, I don't do that, because that's information for them to empower themselves to make those choices.
There's a beauty in this that is, it's sort of appearing to me now as a progression. And sort of the top of that progression is where the vulnerability disappears and it becomes openness, just acceptance. And then, of course, at the other end of that scale is someone who's locked up and doesn't know how to trust, or whatever it is that takes you the first step toward your vulnerability journey, right, to being more open. And to sort of put bookends around that, it seems to me that the most effective practitioners are going to be the ones who are able to make the statements that both of you have made about being completely open in the flow, absent all fear, absent all doubt. That place of vulnerability where it becomes openness just puts you in connection with source and available to whoever is with you in whatever form for healing. And I love that. I don't know many practitioners who describe it that way, and I'm really humbled to be with you guys, because from two different perspectives on this, you describe the process in the same way, and that says a lot to me about how this work can go. Because obviously their clients are going to resonate for Julia, there's clients that are going to resonate for Steven, and that sort of personal connection opens the possibility for resonating with the work that you do. And if you get it wrong, then you find somebody else, and that's fine. But at the core of this, I feel like I'm in the presence of two completely open practitioners. And that's new for me. I can probably count on the fingers of one hand the number of times in my life where I've been in that space, you know, with somebody, and maybe not even just as a client, but maybe just somebody sitting in a lecture, listening to someone else talk, or hearing an audiobook. And so the kind of final question I want to ask around this point is,
Uh-oh.
no, I mean, in your experience, I mean, you have colleagues out there in the world. How do you guys, all of the world of practitioners out there, how do you sustain that kind of openness? I know this sounds like one of those back to it questions, but you guys are on the front lines and it's dangerous out there. So how do you keep that level of openness with you?
I just have, it's like anytime a little inch of fear comes up, I just solidify my foundation of trust, of divine trust, and flow, and that's where I go. And it's that simple. And I'm not saying you don't get a little hiccup, because it's like spirit will guide me. Like I'm doing more and more like things like this, being out there on a radio show, and you know, not and video radio show. So it's not just like with, you know, the radio show I do where I'm behind the scenes, you don't see my face, you don't see everything, but really put myself out there. But that's what spirit wanted me to do. And I'm like, okay, little bit of angst here, but you know, I'm just going to solidify with divine trust and flow, and I'm just going to go with it and just be in the moment.
I love the courage in that. Sorry, Steven, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, but I have to push back on your question, which started with the premise that the world is dangerous. So how do you maintain?
All right, good. I'm glad I went first. Go, Steven.
Steven, I love you, buddy. That's exactly right, though.
I mean, I'm a belief machine. I hear belief in everything, and, you know, and I've trained myself in that way. So the world is a dangerous place. I get what you mean by that 100%. But do I really believe that? Is that how I want to orient myself? No.
Yeah, because if you believe that, you create that reality. So it makes it dangerous. So you really want to start with the belief that, you know, and people say, maybe I'm a little naive, but it's like, I truly look and believe that there's good in everything and beauty in everything. And from there, beauty and goodness and joy shows up at my doorstep every day. So that I'm creating that with the energy, with my beliefs. So my thoughts are my reality. And, you know, people, you know, it's like, I don't know how to be that way. And it's like, I wish it could be that simple. I said, well, it takes a while for some people it's easier, but it's just a constant every day. It's like, oh, I choose, this is what I'm choosing. This is what I want to see. This is what I want to attract. And that's my choice. And that's what I'm going to believe. So you can't say, so Stephen and I aren't buying into your world of fear.
I understand it, and everybody I work with
Yep.
pretty much comes from that. And I probably used to believe differently for a while. But you also asked something else earlier, Bill, and I'm watching the clock just a little bit, but what is the distinction that you're making between being vulnerable and being open? It sounded like you were saying that do you graduate from vulnerable to just be openness?
I'm curious about that. Yes.
Because
It feels like a progression to me.
Right. And to me, it's just openness. Vulnerability is openness. Like what we started this conversation with, you know, and both of us talking some version of being young and just being like, this is a choice I make. This is who I am. I don't really have a choice, but it is a choice and I keep making it. So is there a distinction between simply being vulnerable and being open? Do those mean the same things? They kind of do to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they mean to me, but when you say it that way, Stephen, and that is like, and you say the transition to it, like vulnerable, you're acting like you're being cautious, you're being fearful, but you're still putting it out there. Where openness is you're just being open. But openness is vulnerability. So it's your
Right.
thought, because for me, vulnerability is vulnerability, but where you're coming from with your interpretation of vulnerability is, Bill, is that there's some kind of fear, or there's some kind of like, oh, I could possibly get hurt here, or this or that, where we
Right.
surrender to that, because it's like, that's all part of the experience.
Or it sounds like with Bill, for you, it's a project. Okay, I'm not so comfortable being vulnerable in the world. I'm now making that a project to be more vulnerable for whatever reasons.
Yes.
And then I'll reach a point where I'm just an open person and I don't have the project anymore. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, I was trying to sort of express that, because vulnerability is one of those overused words like authenticity and all that. So nobody really knows anymore specifically what it means. And I know many people who feel a risk in vulnerability.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's just, I don't feel comfortable being open in the world. I don't feel comfortable being that open with this group at this time. I don't
Yes.
feel that comfortable being, you know, and I'm not saying I don't modulate depending on where I am and where what the situation is, but I don't really ever hold back.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, because I know you well, Stephen, I know that this is true in real life as well as the facilitator of the spiritual workout. This is genuinely how Stephen lives his life. And I'm going to suspect, Julia, that this is true for you as well.
Yes.
You cannot turn it on. It's
Right.
always on.
It's
Right.
always on. It's like I'll get in a situation and it's like, I'll be whatever I'm supposed to be. And, you know, I just have to, like, as long as I don't have like my son with me or some kind of relative that can go, mother,
Right.
yeah, I do. It's like, yeah, because I try to be when I'm with somebody like that, I try to be a little bit considerate. But even with my son now, it's like, he's up in Pennsylvania and I'm down in Florida, so he doesn't have to like do things with me. But I still remember like singing in the car, being like just singing in the car, and it was nighttime, and he's like hiding in the bottom of the seat because it's like, oh my gosh, you're embarrassing me, you know. But I was being authentic and I was being open and I was having a good time, you know. So it's like, I can't help myself. It's like, I just want to have fun and I want to have joy. And what if that feels uncomfortable to somebody else? You know, I apologize for their uncomfortableness, but I'm not apologizing for who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I've experienced that. I've been the son in the back seat. right?
Yeah.
Embarrassed by my mom, who was chronically happy. I mean,
Yeah.
what's wrong with that, right?
Yeah. Would you rather have them like, I'm sorry, I'm so bad, so sad, we're gonna die, I can't drive through the car, right? You know, it's like,
Yeah,
what do you want? You know, it's like, you know, I would rather just be joyful and trust and just really believe that it's like, it's going to be a beautiful day, and find beauty in everything that happens, or find joy, or find laughter, even the most extreme, some that would make, that stress you out. It's like, well, what's the beauty here?
yeah,
What's the good points? I had a repair, the handyman was here because we had some issues, and he goes, I wish all the people that I dealt with were as positive. You always see a ray of light in everything. And I'm like, it's just who I am. I can't help myself,
yeah.
you know? So it's like, so other people notice that about me, but I just, you know, him saying that was like, wow, I guess I do, you know?
I guess.
I guess I do.
You know you do.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm not conscious.
Yes.
It's not a conscious that I've got to be that way. It's
Right.
just part of who I am.
It's always on. It's always on.
on. Always
Yeah.
on.
There's something else. It's Stephen, you always say this, the law of attraction is always on, right? So let's assume for a moment, people, if you're listening and have any doubt at all, but if that's true, what would you rather attract? You know,
Exactly.
I'd rather attract happiness, right? I don't want to have to be in this role and then change hats and then be in this role where I'm happy. What's the sense in that? You can have it all.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is, so a preview of coming attractions here. It occurred to me along our conversational way here that the next question we need to tackle is, what do you want? Right? So the next time we talk, right? The next time we talk.
So can we do that for you, Bill, and find out what you want, and then
Oh yeah,
Steven
so
and
I'll play
I
along. Yeah, I'll play. I'll be happy to play along. And if John's back with us, maybe he will too. But what do you want? I mean, that's really a fundamental question for all of us who've been shriven of most of life in COVID. What do you want?
I actually had somebody I did an interview that asked me, what do I want like 5 years from now? And
Oh
I said,
yeah.
I said, I just want to be in joy and happiness and magic and good food, you know,
Yes,
really
of
good
course.
food.
Good food.
That's what I want. And it's like, the simplicity of my answer was like, they are like that. They didn't know what to do with that.
Right.
Because everything else, if I have all that, then I have everything I need, because the other stuff is just going to keep coming in and, you know, give me that beauty, whatever else needs to support that, you
We're
know,
going to
as
unpack
far
this.
as, yeah, and not having a visual of what that happiness and that joy has to have, all these little pieces to make that work.
That I've loved the inspiration behind this. That's a preview of coming attractions, everybody. So, I mean, think about it before the next time we get together. Any final words of wisdom? I'm going long on this one because I can, because I'm the host. So,
You're the boss.
I'm the boss. I can always edit out all of my stuff later and compact it down. Any final words of wisdom on this interesting notion of vulnerability?
I would just say that our reluctance to be vulnerable, as we're talking about it these days in this conversation and beyond, the best-selling books about it, the fact that it is such an in front of us issue. From where I sit, be okay with wherever you are on that scale.
Mm-hmm.
If you're super ultra open, vulnerable all the time and it's easy, but you find yourself paying a price for that in some way, there will be things that you can do. If you're on the other side of the scale where it's like, yeah, I'm kind of understanding something about this and maybe I should be more vulnerable, then just really that right there is enough to get you going, you know? And
Yeah.
the fact that you're thinking that all the books are talking about it, that we're talking about it, is because it's one of the vestiges, if you ask me, of the old consciousness. It's this idea that we're not safe is what's going away. So all these ways that we have had of feeling and being unsafe in the world are coming up in front of our faces so that we can say, oh, hello, issue, and goodbye. Humanity is letting go of this.
Yeah.
So the good news is, if it's something you're struggling with, you're certainly not alone, and you'll find plenty of people willing to have this conversation and be able to show you lots of different ways to move, to let go of it, to let go of the resistance to be vulnerable. And I would certainly encourage you to do it, because it's happening anyway. And the sooner any of us get there, the more. Nobody goes from being afraid to be vulnerable to being vulnerable and then running back. There's such benefit and value and richness and joy and pleasure in the willingness. And if it takes a little bit of a journey to get from where you are to there, I'd say
worth it.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, wow. Those are the three final words. It's worth it.
Mhm.
Anything else to add, Julia?
No, I got it. He's got it. I can't. I think
Every one of us
well
would
said.
say
Yeah.
the same thing, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right.
This is beautiful. I mean, what a pleasure to be on this journey to the answer, whatever are the answers, whatever they are. It's more fun actually in the journey. Like one of you just said, once you realize, it's like, oh, okay, well, obviously, and there's no going back.
Right.
This is a question that when you only have to answer once, right? Well, hopefully, or if you continue to answer it, then you continue to do that because that's your path and that's your journey toward the answer. You guys, thank you so much for your candor and insight. This is just such a humbling thing to walk toward these answers together. And for you audience, we'll put the contact details for Steven and Julia into the show notes so you know how to find them and follow their work and see what's going on there, and connect with them if that's something that you're called to do in a way that helps sustain your journey. Thank you again to our sponsors, Green Zone Hero, Music Care. Couldn't do it without you guys. And of course, the very best part of AHO Radio is our audience. If you're out there listening, watching, subscribe, ring the bell. We'll continue to do this for you, and we'll be back with the last part of our conversation with Steven and Julia relatively soon, I imagine, because this is fun and I like doing it. So until the next time, thank you, everybody. I'm your co-host, Bill Protzmann. AHO. Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!